that award, I think, was maybe one of the most meaningful things to me because it comes from the Michigan library system. And libraries for so long have had such a really near and dear place in my heart. Not only, I mean, I grew up rurally, and so libraries really have always been kind of a center point of the community of people to meet and access to books. That's how I got books mostly growing up. And then when we started our business up in Northport, Michigan, that was how we had internet. And so it's all of the services that libraries provide that feel so critical. And so in any way, shape, or form, to be able to get to interact with the libraries and also the people who are utilizing them, which clearly all of you are, feels like a real special thing. So I think now, maybe more than ever, I think we're all feeling kind of that little bit of a sense of loss of some of the social fabrics, and libraries are just so much a part of that. So thank you for tuning in, Samantha. Thank you for having me and for making time on your Tuesday for me. So the way that tonight's going to work is that I was going to give kind of a brief overview of why I wrote this cookbook, and then also sort of the process of it and a little bit about the book itself. And then we're going to open it up to questions in case you have some. And then I pre-recorded a demo of a recipe demonstration. So we'll be able to go over and watch that in a different platform. And I think Samantha's also going to upload that to the library's Vimeo site, as well as this talk as a whole, if anybody wants to share it after the fact. So like Samantha said, my name is Abra Berens. I grew up in Michigan. I grew up about 20 miles south of Holland, over on the west side of the state. And I've been a Michigander my whole life. I've lived in some other places, but always stayed tied to the state. And I grew up on a pickle farm, which is, I know that we can't see each other, but most people laugh at that, and that's okay. Because a pickle farm, I think the first time I told somebody when I was in college, they were like, do the jars grow on the plants? And I was like, no, they're just a specific type of cucumber. So, my grandfather and my dad had started this pickle farm, and my parents were farming about 400 acres, as well as both being anesthesiologists. So it was a really busy household that we grew up in. And we always had a big garden. So I was around food growing up, and meals were really, we connected with each other. And it was often late at night after getting home from doing tractor work or switching over irrigation or things like that. But it was always such a special part of it. So as soon as I could get off farm to do something besides hoeing pickles and picking up hauling wagons and things like that to Heinz in Holland, I got a job in a restaurant, and I started working at Peretti's restaurant in Holland, just as a busser and in a deli there, slicing meat and making sandwiches the best I could. And kind of was interested in it and kept always being drawn back to restaurants. And then I went to the University of Michigan and started working at Zingerman's Deli. And mostly I was there during the summers and a couple of days a week while I was in school. And it was there that I went from working in the front of the house to working in the back of the house. And that's where I started cooking. And it was the first place that I really understood this idea of a local agriculture. Roger Bowser is the chef and managing partner there, and he was bringing in all of this beautiful produce from Tantre Farm and anything from the farmer's market. We would go to the market every Wednesday and Saturday and see what was there and bring it in, which was really unique in such a high volume business, to have these beautiful greens that were coming in to go on the sandwiches. It wasn't something that they had ever really prioritized before. So I was kind of learning about it from him and not sure what I wanted to do. I had graduated with a history and English degree, and naturally kitchens don't seem to fit quite into that, but it did for me. And I talked to him about going to cooking school, and he said, there's a place that might be great for you. And it's in Ireland. It's called Ballymaloe. So after college and after a few more years of working at the deli, I moved to Ireland and started cooking school and that cooking school is only 50 students, and it's on a 100-acre working organic farm. So that was the first place where I really started to only cook with what was being produced on that farm. And I really missed restaurants, but I also knew that I really was so fascinated by this idea of just cooking what was from a specific place. And I thought, if I continue to cook, that's what I want my food to be about. And I think that harkens back to being around food production growing up, but then also realizing that, fewer and fewer of us are really interacting with farmers and learning what goes into food production, the things that we eat every day. And my mind, when I started farming, was blown, realizing that these things that we put in everything, like onions and garlic and celery, take months and months and months to grow, and they're almost seen as cast off ingredients. And so I was really learning more about that and wanted to feature it. So in 2009, I moved to Northport, Michigan, which is about 20 miles north of Traverse City. So it's right at the very, I don't know how to do this on Zoom because it'll be backwards, but it's at the very end of the Pinky Peninsula up in Leelanau County. And my friend and business partner, Jess Peace Corps, and I started Bare Knuckle Farm, which was about 5 acres is in a frost valley between two cherry orchards up there. And we just had a go of it. And we started planting seeds and building hoop houses and growing as much food as we could. And for me, that was maybe the most instructive time, because I was learning about these things that I had been touching in kitchens for years at this point. But the first time I actually pulled a radish out of the ground and saw what it was doing, and then saw that same radish bed go to bolt because it got so hot that the plant was stressed and it decided to send up its flower shoot. These were all things I had never experienced before. And so as we continued to farm and we were doing some underground dinners that were 7-course meals based on what we were growing, I was really exploring this idea of like cooking all the time and really change the way that I cook. When I came up in restaurants, it was at the height of nose to tail Fergus Henderson, eating all the offal and being sure nothing goes to waste. And I was still really excited about like big pieces of meat. And then I realized that first year how many more vegetables I was eating and how much I was really loving them and not really craving meat in quite the same way. And that was a pretty marked turn for me. And so at the same time, I also realized how many people were asking the same questions every week at our farmers market stall. We did 4 farmers markets a week. And, almost every farmers market, somebody would say, how do I cook beets? I've never liked them. I don't know what to do with them. What do I do? Or what is kohlrabi, this thing that shows up in the spring and in the fall, and it's got like a shock of leaves coming out the top of it. And, what do I do with this? So I pitched to the Record Eagle, which is the paper up there, a bi-weekly column where we would just talk about different ingredients that we were growing and things that were showing the best. And so that's kind of where the writing started. And that's how the book is laid out. So again, Ruffage is the cookbook. It's got 29 different vegetables, and each vegetable is a chapter. So I did the same thing that I would do with the column, which is write an opening essay that had something to do with that vegetable in particular. If it was a story about growing it, story about cooking it, just different sort of thoughts on it, what it means to me culturally, because food was so interwoven not only just in my family but also in all of our families and in how we relate to each other at different picnics and church basements and things like that. So wanting to bring all of those stories together, and then I found that through farming, I kind of realized for the first time we have the same vegetables every year, and every year there's asparagus, and then shortly after that there's cucumber and summer squash. And then it transitions into the tomatoes and peppers and eggplant, and then the winter squash and the Brussels sprouts. And then we're excited again in the spring when the asparagus comes back. But every year, you kind of look forward to your old favorites, but then are also looking for new ways to prepare them. And so I thought the way that my brain works is very linearly. And so I was like, okay, we've got an ingredient. Then the next thing to think about is how it's prepared. And so that's how the book is broken down. So it's ingredient, what to look for when you're buying, store it, different notes on it, and then different preparation techniques. And what I found is that something as simple as asparagus, the preparation techniques are grilled and roasted and then also raw. And by the time I had eaten all of the pan roasted asparagus that I could stomach in a season, I was like, I need something else to eat. with this. And so started shaving it raw into a vegetable salad, or started grilling it to get a little bit of that smoky flavor, and how those ingredients then present so differently on the plate, no matter how you treat them. And so that's the idea behind the book. And then the idea after the preparation technique is that you could have a vegetable that is prepared the same way and present it with a bunch of different ingredients to make it show lots of different ways on a plate. So going back to the beet example, the recipe in the book is for steam roasted beets with smoked whitefish and sour cream and dill, very Eastern European in flavor, but you could prepare those beets the exact same way and then just change what's going with them. And you could make a salad in the wintertime with roasted beets and some feta and orange segments and pecans and mint, and it would feel so different than that one with dill and sour cream and smoked whitefish. Or in the fall, you could do a salad with apples and walnuts, and that too would feel different. And so even though we have the same ingredients, we prepare them the same way, it's how all of those things get combined together that make things feel new and fresh and exciting. And that's the goal for Ruffage, is to sort of codify the 15 plus years that I've been cooking and the, it was like 4 or 5 full-time years farming into a reference tool for that, and hopefully have some funny stories along the way to lighten it up. So that's how the cookbook is organized and what it does. And now I think the thing that's been really exciting for me is to see people cooking from it and then also taking it to new places. So I got an email the other day from someone who said, I don't actually like any of the flavor combinations that you put together in the book for beets, but I like this one. And she had made a salad with fresh fava beans and some ricotta, and I can't remember what the other thing was, but something else. And she was just so excited about it. And I think that, we're all capable of cooking. A lot of times I think people feel really scared to do it wrong, or that you have to be a chef to be able to do it creatively. And I don't think that has to be the case. And so that's the goal for Ruffage.
Did you want to move into the Q&A now, or?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. If you want to ask a question, you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. Hopefully we don't have too many people talking over each other, but I think that would be probably the best way to go about it. So go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question.
Oh, I have a question. Sorry.
Is it Becky?
Yes. I decided to come on video.
Perfect.
I in all transparency, like a friend told me about the book, sorry, the lighting. And I just started eating a lot of basically plant-based diet.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much vegan, but I like to say plant-based because I'm just trying to get the most nutrients as possible from the vegetables that I'm eating. So I wasn't sure if your book included animal products like cheese and whatnot, but I was wondering if you have experience in working like without oil and with your vegetables. And I haven't done that yet. I've been looking into it and I was curious.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I think there's a lot of conversations right now about plant-based diets and how much meat are we eating, and dairy and things like that. And there is both meat and dairy in the book. I'm not vegetarian, but the way that I sort of view vegetables, and what I hope more and more of us are doing, is that the vegetables, I grew up in a very like meat and potatoes household where a meal didn't feel complete unless it had, a piece of roast chicken, some sort of roast, whatever. And I think that now I don't feel that way as much because of the diversity of what's in the vegetable category, that you can have, a couple of different dishes that have such different textures and flavors that it really feels satisfying without those things. As far as, and then especially too, I think there are more and more options for good plant-based proteins, things like, a diversity of different types of beans and lentils. I'm not much one for a fake meat situation. Like I don't tend to buy the tempeh corned beef or tofurkey or whatever, mostly because I eat meat, so it's not relevant to me. But I think that as far as cooking with fats, a lot of the micronutrients that are in vegetables are fat soluble. And so I am a big believer in eating a good amount of fat and healthy fats, you know, that you can have things like, if I had to choose between a hydrogenated palm oil and bacon fat, I would choose the bacon fat because that's coming from hopefully a well-raised animal, and it's not going through any sort of, you know, chemical process to hydrogenate the fats. But everybody has to make their own decisions on those things and do what kind of makes you feel good. And I think that we are in a place right now in our world where a lot of people are looking to what they're eating as a guide for how they're feeling. And if something makes you feel good, I would keep doing it. And if it doesn't, take a break for a little bit and see. As far as not cooking with oils, I don't have a ton of experience with that. So I'm not that well versed, and maybe somebody else in the group does and can speak to it.
Yeah, no worries. I thought, just wanted to ask the question, but I would just want to say on the point about being satisfied with meals with more vegetables. In my experience, at least in completely cutting out animal products, I have felt the exact same way. I've been very surprised at how much, I feel like it's very easy to cook meat bad, but it's very easy to cook vegetables well.
Yeah.
And I've just been so amazed at how satisfying eating a wider variety of vegetables can be. So I do look forward to flipping through your book and whatnot, because it looks beautiful. Just looking at the book looks beautiful. And I'm excited to, like, you really caught my attention with like 29 vegetables and each one is a chapter. Like that intrigued me. Like I'm excited to look through that and read that. So
well, thank you. And yeah, I think speaking to the idea of feeling satisfied with a fully vegetable meal, I think I take a lot of inspiration from some of the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cultures that will have, instead of kind of one big star on the plate, that really do sort of a decentralized plate where there's, you know, some, like what we're going to have for dinner tonight. We're going to have some roast sweet potatoes that will have some like crispy roast chickpeas on top. We'll have a green salad. We've got a little bit of asparagus left. So we're getting that creaminess from the potatoes and the crunch from the chickpeas. We'll pan roast the asparagus, and so that'll have its own 10. I almost always have some sort of leafy green salad because there's just something really nice about all those different leaves. And it would be really nice if we had a couple of tomatoes. We could slice up some tomatoes and have that kind of really juicy side to it. But I think anything that's hitting on, you know, we eat so much with our eyes. And so if there is a meal that you can put together that has a lot of colors to it and a lot of different textures and things like that, it usually satisfies even my dad, who my favorite game to play with him is that I'll make dinner when I go to his house, and it depends. It's a successful meal when it's at the end of the meal, we're having dessert, when he realizes that there wasn't any meat in it, you know, and not again, because I don't think there's anything wrong with eating meat. It's just a nice little game to play. Like, what does make you feel satisfied? What does make you feel treated? And maybe for him, it's just not having to cook for himself or having somebody else do the dishes. And there's all these different things that go into what it means. I think we're seeing the thing closed that at least some of the takeout meals that I've had, there have been nights where I feel so luxurious eating a takeout meal, because it means I'm not washing the dishes from all 3 meals 7 days a week. But then there are other times where it's like I just miss having a server there, having somebody else pour the glass of wine or something like that. And all those things are tied together with food. Thanks for asking.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Who else has a question? Krista?
I try to eat one big salad a day, and I've recently discovered how good it is to put baked vegetables or sauteed vegetables on a salad. So what are some of your favorite baked vegetables that you think would go well on a salad?
Oh man, yeah, I'm with you. We started nicknaming them farmers salads, because it was kind of anything that came back from the field. It happened a lot when on harvest day we would have like a stray carrot or like 2 little baby marble potatoes, or you know, all of those different things. It would all get tossed in with the greens. So I think anything as far as a roasted or baked vegetables, I think anything that has some nice strong structure, like the root vegetables, like again, sweet potatoes, regular potatoes, parsnips, carrots, even things like rutabaga or turnips could be roasted really well for that. And I like doing a mix of the roasted and the raw. So that it's, you got kind of that warm cooked texture, but then also some crunch from some raw stuff. And for the raw vegetables, it really depends on also how you cut it. I think about carrots and how sometimes we'll do a salad that'll have a bed of roasted carrots where we've left the carrots, they're full length and roasted them whole. So it takes quite a while and they get really caramely on the outside and really soft on the inside. And then we'll put greens with that, take a vegetable peeler to another carrot and just peel it into wide ribbons. So you get that kind of silky layers of color and of crunch. And then you could cut it up like you would for a veggie tray and have something that actually has crunch, or grate it for something that's going to make a slaw. And I feel that way about cucumbers a lot too, that maybe we just ate a lot of them growing up, that I was sort of like, a cucumber is a cucumber and that's all it's got to offer, is that kind of like wet crunch. But then I found, I would started cutting cucumbers into really long planks and using those as vehicles for ranch dressing and hummus and dip and things like that. Or cutting them into a salad into half moons that are, pretty thin. So you get sort of those little layers and little flecks of crunch. And then I was at a bread workshop last September, and a friend, or now friend from there, had spent a lot of time in Sichuan province. And what she would do was the traditional Chinese way of taking the big wide cleaver knives and just using that and smashing the cucumbers. And so they'll just break into all of these really irregular pieces. And those craggly ends will catch whatever sauce you're putting on it in sort of different ways, and it'll hold on to it in certain places, and it'll shunt it off the skin and things like that. So I think that it's a long-winded answer to your question, but I think different ways that you can cut it or put it into the salad will make a big difference too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Who else has a question? Well, I have a question then for when you guys are thinking about kind of tomorrow's going to be Wednesday, your Wednesday night meal, and what are some of the hurdles that you are finding for a middle of the week, very, got to get dinner on the table sort of meal? What are some of the hurdles or successes, I guess?
The time it takes to prep vegetables.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And is that just like the cutting, having to get them in the oven and things like that?
Yeah, I guess I stay at home with 2 young kids. I have a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old. So like eating lots of vegetables is just, it's time consuming in prepping them and getting them ready to cook them. I guess you can buy like pre-cut and whatnot, and I've done that at times, but I think the barrier sometimes is just the extra time I feel like it takes to do the vegetables, and sometimes just adding like different spices and stuff that you were saying, just changing it up a little bit, I can kind of get in a rut of that.
Yeah, I found what works, because we have a similar thing that sometimes it just feels like I'll get home at 8 o'clock at night and be like, oh, I've got another 40 minutes of doing stuff until we can sit down and eat, and then have to go to bed right after. And so now what I've been trying to do lately, especially with going to the store less frequently and buying things in kind of larger batches, is to kind of take a couple of hours, if you have it, after you get home from the store, and we've nicknamed it vegetable triage, where we'll go through what's been brought in and kind of prep things that can get prepped ahead of time. And I found that I will eat a lot more salad if I wash all of the greens right when I get them home. Or if I know I've got a busy week coming up, I will take the head of red cabbage and shave it really thinly, and then have it in a Ziploc bag in the fridge so that I can pull handfuls of that and make a salad out of that. And so I think it's about being kind of knowing what those hurdles are for you and seeing if there are ways around it. And if that means like finding those couple of hours, or if it means that that actually sometimes for batch cooking where you're making, you know, any given night so that you have leftovers or you can reheat it. And sometimes that's actually the hurdle. So if it means like maybe then red cabbage isn't your thing, and, you know, buying a bag of already prepped salad greens means that you'll actually eat salad, I don't think there's any shame in that whatsoever. I also have found, I'm a real lover of condiments, and found that, you know, just by, if I can take a little bit of time and put together some dressings to have in the fridge, then I don't have to whip it up at the time. I like kind of chunky, relishy condiments, things like, what I will do lately is I've been taking dates and mixing them with chili oil and a little bit of cilantro and lime, and just leaving that in the fridge and then pulling that out and spooning it over something like roast carrots or that cabbage salad. Or, you know, we're getting into tomato and cucumber season and having some basil oil, making pesto. I was just never making it. So I was like, I don't have pine nuts. I don't have Parmesan cheese. Like, I don't have a lemon. I don't even know if lemon's supposed to go in it or not. I can't remember. I have to look up the recipe. Like, I don't have time for all that. But I found that if I just had basil and olive oil, and once a week I would put it in the blender and make a really nice, thick, green, bright basil-y oil, I would spoon that over everything, and it works roughly the same as pesto. It's not, I'm sure there's an Italian grandmother like rolling over in her grave right now and was like, that's not pesto. But, you know, at our house, it does it okay. And it means that I'm more likely to then not to eat those tomatoes instead of just letting them sit on the counter and passing them over. And maybe that's part of it too. I think for me is being sure that the produce is in a place where I can see it. We always sort of joke, my husband like he blacks out when he looks into a drawer of the fridge. And so, you know, trying to keep things out of the drawers or in places where we can see it. And it's the same for a lot of the pantry items. You know, when you're trying to eat more things like beans and chickpeas and lentils and stuff like that, they were all getting buried into the back of the cabinets or the back of the pantry space. And I was like, I'm excited about these when I bought them, so why don't I pull them forward? And we ended up building some really narrow shelves in our kitchen and then putting them in jars so that they're up so I can see them, be like, oh yeah, I do have that, or I do have whatever else, whatever canned, you know, I generally buy canned chickpeas. And so remembering that I have them on hand reminds me to use them.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I actually have struggled with that too, just remembering what you have around. And with the sauces, I actually have discovered that during this quarantine, I had time to make some mango avocado basil sauce. It's amazing. And I even swapped out the basil for cilantro, and I just put it, I had extra, I put it in ice cubes, froze it, wrapped it in some press and seal. And I also do that with roasted garlic. I just make like a mash of it, and then I can put it in these cubes and I can just have it ready to go. And that has been great as far as sauces and whatnot, to pre-make that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always like looking out for your future self. You know, I never really want to be doing it when I'm doing it, but then future Abra is always really grateful for it.
Exactly.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Did somebody else? Well, I was just going to say that we were talking a little bit about batch cooking. On that front, what would you say the best preparation of vegetables for batch cooking? Would it be like roasted or baked or something of that sort? What would be the easiest or the best way to meal prep that lasts long?
Yeah, I think it depends. This is like kind of an answer that might not be satisfying, but it depends a little bit on the vegetables. So for anything that is pretty sturdy, like the roots, I would say, yeah, go ahead and roast them. And I'll sometimes only roast them halfway. So it's a little bit like, minute rice is just rice that's been boiled halfway and then re-dried. And so the time it takes to finish it is so much shorter, because most things when it's cooking is exponential. So you get through that really slow slog at the start and then it just finishes up. So like tonight we're going to have these sweet potatoes, and we'll probably roast, instead of, roasting 2 for each of us, we'll roast 5 or however many I bought at the store, and then just have the other ones on hand. And then you can turn that into a really quick hash in the morning by pan frying it and throwing an egg on top. I could bring it to work for lunch, things like that. I would say that and the same is true, I think, for potatoes. You could, like, certainly boiling, I try to have just extra boiled potatoes on hand, because then you can chop them up and put them into a potato salad or pan fry them for sort of a crispy side. Any number of things like that. And then as far as some of the greens and things like that, I think just washing them in a larger amount, vegetables tend to not last as long once they're really just disturbed. And so if you cut the greens, from the base, especially something like a romaine or any of those lettuces that have kind of that, that milky white liquid that goes through, those seem to brown the fastest. And so sometimes it's kind of a crapshoot. If I know it's going to be a really busy week, I'll go ahead and cut those up. And if it's going to be a more mild week, then I'll probably leave them just so that they don't get that browning. But I think but either way, just having them there and kind of knowing what you have on hand seems to help with that. And then as far as something like tomatoes, if obviously a fresh tomato is kind of on its own, and you have to cut it to right to when you're going to use it. Otherwise it tends to kind of break down. But we'll do a lot in the fall with things like tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers, just to get a really big pot. And if I'm going to be doing something like baking a lasagna or roasting beets, then we'll just put a big pan of roasted cherry tomatoes into the oven, so that it's doubling up what's cooking at the same time that your oven is on. I feel like, especially this time of year in the summer, if you're going to go to the work of turning on your oven, it's nice to have all of the racks filled. And then even if it's only cooking it halfway or something like that, then you've got kind of a leg up on it. And that's where I really love restaurant cooking, because to cook for 5 people is not that much more work than cooking for 2 people. And then cooking for 10 people is not so much more work than that. So you get these sort of efficiencies by having full pans or bigger batches in that way. It sometimes becomes a problem, because then, there are actually only 2 of us that live in this house, and sometimes it seems like there are 20. But then that's a different problem to have. Yeah. Any other questions from anyone?
Yeah, I don't have necessarily a question. Well, I guess it's a question. A couple of years ago, my husband had gotten me these at my request. They're called super cubes. I don't know if you guys can see these.
Yeah.
And I will, if I open a big can of tomatoes or tomato sauce, I'll put them in here and then freeze them. And they're actually 1 cup cubes, and if there's a line on them that says half cup cubes, and I'll freeze them. And then if I just need a cup of sauce or a cup of chicken broth, which tend to be the 2 things that I'll make in bulk and freeze, I can pull them out of a Ziploc bag. Do you have any suggestions as to how I could use this for vegetables?
Yes, I think that that's a great tool to have, and it's a good way to be thinking about this batch cooking and then having it in smaller amounts for the ready use. I think for vegetables, I would say in the book there's several recipes for vegetable purees, which most of the recipe testers were surprised were as easy as they were, because it feels sort of cumbersome to take your food processor out and have to blend something up. But most of the time, it's usually starchier vegetables, again, parsnips, celery root, cauliflower, winter squash, things like that. but you can do them in large amounts, and then just it's usually some onion that's sweat down, a little bit of maybe white wine or hard cider, something to give it some acidity, the vegetable, and then I often use cream, but you could use a coconut milk, or you could use just olive oil or something like that. And then once everything is really, really soft, just whiz it up in the food processor, and then those freeze perfectly. And so then you could put them into the cubes and use that. Then either I use those purees a lot as a replacement for something like a mashed potatoes. Like if you've got like a really saucy, like Sunday gravy or something like that, and then you could have like your parsnip puree and then the Sunday gravy and some fresh spinach or kale or arugula on top. That would be a nice meal. Or you can use those purees to be the base of a soup. So in the book, there's the section in beets that talks about pureed, and that beet puree will dress pasta to make like a really magenta hot pink pasta that kids really seem to like, because it's it's electric in color. And then you could also use that same puree to thin it out and make a borscht style soup by adding some chicken stock, some carrots, some potatoes, things like that, or keep it pureed. And you could also use that puree then to blend with something like white beans or chickpeas and make a hummus out of it, so that then you have that to dip vegetables in. So the way that the variations in Ruffage work is either, like I was saying, about the different salads with different flavor accompaniments, or how to take that one thing and then make things that don't look anything at all like a stew out of whatever puree you've got.
Yeah, I thought that these were just such a great thing, and I'm like, oh, I got all they could use it for all kinds of stuff. And then I got it, and it's just the soup, the chicken stock when I boiled down the bones, and then I was just putting the tomato sauce in it because I'd find I wasn't using them all the time, the whole can of tomato products. So and then it wouldn't spoil in the fridge, right? So it was, as our family gets smaller, it makes it easier to compartmentalize meals, I guess.
Yeah, and I think too, if anybody doesn't have cubes like that, you can also most restaurant people don't have regular Tupperware, but we have all of those deli containers that you'll get, potato salad and stuff in, and those are often in cup, pint, and quart measurements. That's our like standard system, and so you can often buy sleeves of those at a deli or a grocery store. They'll sell you extra ones, or go a place like Gordon Food Service, or even Meyer, I think, has them occasionally. And then you can kind of portion those out too and freeze those. Generally, that'll work well too.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
I had a question. There you go. I feel like I don't really do a great job of storing vegetables in my refrigerator and understanding when the humidity drawer or the humidity drawer, when I should just keep them out of the refrigerator. And is it really just that I'm buying store-bought versus direct farmers market, and some things just don't last as long because they're not as fresh as direct from a farm? So any tips you can give on, hey, don't put green beans in the humidity drawer? Like, what are the do's and don'ts?
So yeah, that's a great question. And in the book, every vegetable has sort of a quick, how to store sort of thing. I find if I can't remember what to do with it, I often think about how it's stored at the grocery store. And so if you see something at the grocery store that's at room temperature, I would keep it at room temperature. And I would keep it out of direct sunlight and away from extreme heat. But that's things like tomatoes, eggplant, summer squash, any of those things really do better if they're just kept at room temp. And if they're in the fridge, grocery store refrigerators are different than our home refrigerators. And so the fans work differently. And the danger in home refrigerators is often that if things aren't covered, the wind, the cold air that's moving around it is going to kind of suck the moisture out of those things. And so if you have something like, say, for example, you get a head of or a bunch of beets that have the top still on them, if those just go straight into the fridge, those leaves are so broad and they have so much surface area that they're really respirating that moisture much more quickly than the roots, which have less surface area and a denser cell structure. And so I always take those leaves off and are sure that both of them are going. I put them into plastic bags. Some people are avoiding plastic these days, and we'll use something like wrapping it in newspaper or beeswax wrap, things like that. But anything that's going to keep that cold wind from blowing it around. And I'm not a refrigerator design person, but my understanding of the humidity drawer is that it just minimizes the amount of air that's moving through it. And so you have the ability to keep more of that moisture in it. So I think anything I would put into the humidity drawer, anything that just feels even more fragile, something like something that's going to be thinner that might get real limp and wimpy, something like asparagus or beans, whereas something like carrots and potatoes really, they're pretty stalwart and they can take being at cold temperatures for a long time. They're storage crops. And then the other thing to think about with storage is, in general, you just want to avoid big swings in temperature. So once it goes into the fridge, kind of keep it at that constant temperature. And the only plants that's really imperative for something like potatoes, where or any of the crops that are biennials. So like carrots, the way that carrots grow is you plant the seed, and the first year of growth, they grow the big tap roots and all the leaves. And then they will die back from the leaves, and the roots will stay in the ground. And then the second year, the plant will take the energy that's in the root of the carrot and send up a flower shoot to set seed again. And that's the point of all plants, is that they want to set seed and send that seed out. So if you have something like a carrot and you have it at room temperature, and then you put it into the cold of a fridge and then bring it back out to room temperature, that mimics that winter. And so it will start to try to grow again, and it'll start to put off all of those green sprouty leaves from the top. It'll send out those baby hairy roots from underneath, because it's just trying to set that flower seed. So the longer you can keep it at a stable temperature, the less it's going to activate that root. And that's true for potatoes, parsnips, onions, garlic. I'm sure there's more, and I'm just blanking on them right now. But yeah, I think, and also avoiding freezing is the other big thing. So if you have a very full fridge, oftentimes freezing happens in the back of the fridge, because the air can't circulate and it causes that cold wall. So anything that you can put back there that won't block that airflow is sometimes a good idea for that. Or if I used to have this really terrible fridge that would freeze all the time, and so I started putting containers of water back there so that it would freeze the water but not the vegetables itself. Because what happens when it freezes is that the water that's in those cells, water expands when it freezes, and so it bursts those cells, and that's why and then once the cell is burst, it has some damage and bacteria can get into it, and it never thaws the same way, things like that. So those are kind of my rough thumbnail thoughts on storage.
Great, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
On that note, I was just going to say, I found on your website, Abra, you have a list of how to store different vegetables. And I put the link to that PDF in the chat box. So, and after the session is over, I will be sending a link to all that have registered with the video that we'll watch later, a link to this recording, and then I can also include that PDF link as well.
Thanks so much for doing that, Samantha.
Yeah, no problem.
So to purchase your book, is it an Amazon thing, or is it being sold locally at the library, or?
Yeah, you can, and any bookstore. I'm happy to mail you one if you want to send me an email. But yeah, any bookstore is probably easier. I know Pages in Detroit has copies of it, but I think any local shop, if they don't have it, they can certainly order it for you. And then yeah, any of the big guys like Amazon and Barnes and Noble would have it too. And then there should be, Samantha said that you're able to do curbside pickup of the library. So feel free to get it through the library as well and take a look if you want to check it out beforehand.
Yeah, you can put a hold. I believe the library owns a copy. And if you put holds on it, we'll buy more. So the more people with holds on it, the more copies we'll buy. That's usually how it works.
So I think that we were going to go over to the other link to watch the video, and just to kind of introduce the video that we put together. You know, it's kind of what I've been saying before, how you can use the same vegetable and prepare it different ways with different accompaniments to make it feel really different. So I'm a big lover of cauliflower because it is one of those vegetables that I feel like I can buy as a great big head and then either shave it ahead of time, or it just lives in the fridge and waits for me until I'm able to get around to it. So, and it has a pretty mild flavor and a nice surprising crunchy texture for most people. So this is a way to use cauliflower in 4 different variations, and these are the variations that are in the book as well.
So I shared a link in the chat after the PDF. It is a link to a site called Watch Together, and it's a room similar to Zoom, but in which we will be able to watch this demonstration at the same time, so simultaneously. So if you could, we're going to close this Zoom meeting out, and you can all head there. But like I said, the video, it will be on Vimeo, and I will send a link in an email. So if you are unable to log into the Watch Together, or you have to go for whatever reason, it will be available later on, and we'll keep it up on our Vimeo site for at least a month. So you should be able to watch it on your own time, especially if you want to like cook along with Abra. So it's the link that's like W2 number 2G. That's the one we're going to go to. So, but I thank everyone for coming, and
Yeah,
thank you,
so
Abra.
much. Thank you, Samantha. And I just want to say, in case people get kicked off, I feel like there's always this danger as we move around that we won't all be in the same spot again. But I'm just really grateful that you all took the time out of your Tuesday evening to talk together. And my email address is just berens.abra@gmail.com. My website is up. If you have any questions along the way, I really feel like my role as a chef and author is to answer as many questions as I can, to encourage people to cook in their homes, now more than ever. So don't be shy, and happy to reach out anytime if you have questions, and if I can help, I'm more than happy to. And again, just really appreciate the support that you're showing to your library and all of the good work that they're doing there. So Samantha, thank you for that.
Thank you. All right, so we'll see you over in Watch Together. I won't see anybody and you won't see me, but we'll be in the room. And then once I get a good majority of people, we'll start the video. So, all right.